everybody. Happy Wednesday. Today is Wednesday, September 6th. Very excited to chat with y'all tonight. We are going to touch on a lot of assessment things. So go ahead and grab what you need, and we'll be back in about 30 seconds. All right. So by now, all of us, I believe all of us, are now back with students, which is really exciting. But again, it's still the beginning of the year. It's still like all of those mixes of emotions, like the excitement, the nervous energy, all of it. And our kids are feeling it too. So we're all together in this in this work. Before we really get started into our topic for tonight, which is assessment, I did want to share, because I always like to share books that I'm reading. So I just got this one, and it's called Make Teaching Sustainable. And like the little subtitle is 6 Shifts That Teachers Want and Students Need. So I've just started this book, but I love it so far. But when it, like, the title hit me like a ton of bricks, because how many of us are walking around already like, this is not sustainable. My schedule is not sustainable. My workload is not. So I'm excited to kind of go deeper into this book. I'm really excited. So this is Paul-Émeric France, and this is an ASCD book. So I just grabbed it on Amazon. So again, I'm excited to go deeper in it and learn from it. And then I'm also going to share this. So like, I know Rachel and I were on a few weeks ago, we were talking about like our favorite school supplies. And I didn't mention these little things, like the little tabs, like the little mini, they're almost like Post-its, but like, you know, you can use them for marking like a book. I can't find these ones anywhere. And I'm like really specifically looking for these ones because I love the colors, and I love that they're kind of transparent. Like you can kind of see through them. So I'm on the hunt, but I like the colors and I like the patterns on them. So I need to, and one of y'all's gonna be like, I found them on Amazon. I need to like sit down and order a whole bunch of those because I use them so much. Yeah, anyway, you guys know me. I kind of go off down little rabbit holes sometimes. But I'm really excited to talk with y'all. So earlier this week, yesterday, I was working with the Ames Network. We had a really cool event with Tracy Fuentes and Becky Rupnick. And I was talking to different educators and leaders about assessment and like really looking at like access scores and things like that. And I sat down with one team, and we had a whole bunch of different conversations. But the idea of assessment, I think that like if we were to give ourselves our own little scale of like, how do you feel about assessment? I haven't met very many educators that are like, yes, it's my passion. Like, I love it. We need more of it. But all of us have like kind of varying levels of comfort when we talk about like doing data dives, and when we talk about like comparing growth from year to year, all of these different things. So I appreciate having just dialogue and conversation around assessment, especially for multilingual learners. So I want to start first by acknowledging that multilingual students are often some of the most overly assessed students in our schoolhouses, like truly, because not only are they taking all of their content assessments, they're taking all of their like benchmarking, just like everybody else. They're taking the state testing like everybody else, but they're also getting like either screeners and or the access test. That's a really time intensive test, right? And we don't get the data until months and months later, like literally months and months later. And so it's a lot. And if students are in a transitional bilingual program or late exit bilingual program, or they're in a two-way, either two-way or one-way dual language program, they're getting additional assessments too, because they're also testing and assessing for a heritage language as well. So it's just a lot. And so sometimes like I get really anxious and really worried because people will come to me and say, hey, Carly, like, what do you have for progress monitoring for language? And I'm like, or like, what assessments would you recommend for progress monitoring for language? And again, I'm like, because our students already have so much happening. They're assessed all the of the time. And I'm not even talking about like the big tests, like the state level assessments or even the district level benchmarking. We have so much data already. We need to be like really strategic and mindful about how we're utilizing what students are already producing and expressing. And let's use that and kind of maximize those things. I do want to share a few resources because again, I love books. I love professional reading. So this is Dr. Dave Schmidt's book. Dave Schmidt is like the nicest human being you could possibly meet on the face of this earth. But I love this book because, and this one's not like centered on multilingual data and assessment, but this one is called Making Assessment Work. And I love this. It says for educators who hate data but love kids. I'm like, that's me. It's me, Dave. But I really, really love this. And it's like, some books like you're like, oh, like they take so long to get through. Not this one. Like this one reads very nicely. It's like a very approachable book. So even if you're like, Carly, data is not my thing or assessment is not my thing, you'll like this one. And then the other one I'll recommend is like a 2-in-1 special because Margot Gottlieb has this book and I really love it and appreciate it because I haven't seen too many books that are like hitting on multilingual data and assessment. So this one is great. So she's got, this one is the Handbook for School and District Leaders. So this is like the pair to this one. So this one is designed for educators. So again, great to kind of go together. But I really like that Margot is kind of thinking about things like from that systemic lens. Like it's not just for one person in the schoolhouse, it's for everybody. So I appreciate that those kind of all fit together and go together. Okay. So when we were talking about progress monitoring, I sometimes get really anxious because people are hungry for additional assessments. We don't need new assessments. Again, knowing that our students have the busiest assessment calendar known to humankind, we need to stop. So if you are worried, or like, first I want to ask people, why do you feel the need to have everything progress monitored? Is it like the conditioning that we have been received? Like we have to be monitoring and tracking and collecting more and more and more and more. Like I want us to be mindful of like, why do you feel the need that we need to progress monitor this particular student or this entire student group? So that's like my first question. My second question is, not my second question. My second point is that we don't need to purchase new programs or assessment tools. We don't need to. Authentic assessment comes from the work that students are already doing. And again, if we think about a student's instructional day, they are producing and expressing language in science, in math, in social studies, in drama, in PE, and visual art. Everywhere they go, they are expressing language and they are utilizing language for all of these different content areas. So what I would suggest is, if you are the EL teacher, if you are the TDE or dual language teacher, and you feel the need or the desire to collect more language samples, I would think of it as like, again, just like that, a language sample. I don't want you trying to create a whole brand new assessment. I don't want you to deliver a whole new assessment. Let's use what we got. So again, if I were to say, okay, on the 23rd of every month, I'm just going to put it in my Google Calendar so it actually gets done. I am off. If it's not on my calendar, I don't do it. So I have to program it into my calendar. Okay, on the 23rd of every month, I'm just going to do a linguistic snapshot. And I'm going to go into whatever platforms I have access to as the EL teacher. So if like the third grade teacher, if she has me shared on all of her Seesaw accounts, I can go in at any point and see what students are contributing in math and social studies and science and all of the things. If I am a middle school teacher, maybe I'm using like Google Classroom or Canvas or whatever, right? Could be a whole lot of different things. But I have access, and if you don't, you should talk to your teachers, to already like all of these different pieces that students are expressing. So I can just pull from those pieces. And I can say, okay, so this is what a student submitted for science. Like they had to write a paragraph explaining, all of the steps that they used to do this problem or like solve or do this experiment. I'm going to take that and I'll take like the grade level content rubric that the teacher has, right? And I'll look at that and I'll see what kind of score they got. But now I can go ahead and overlay like a WIDA writing rubric. And now I can just use that same thing and use that as a language assessment. Done. That is like a little snapshot, right? So I want us to just, again, be really mindful of like what students are already producing and expressing, and let's just use that. So again, maybe it's once a month, maybe it's once every other month, and you're doing like a collection, you're doing like a speaking poll, right? So like a little capture from a Seesaw recording or a Flipgrid recording or whatever. And now I'm going to go ahead and save that. Maybe I pull it into like a Google folder or something like that. Now I have almost like a portfolio growing of that student and what they are expressing. You could also every other month or every month, however often you want to do this. I wouldn't do this all the time, truly. Is I would have a quick conference with the students and say like, this is where I placed you. Like, this is what, what I was hearing. How would you place yourself? Or like, what's a rating scale that you would use? How would you assess, your languaging in this moment? So again, it kind of keeps students thinking about like their expression. Maybe again, they're either written or oral language expression. So you can think about it that way too. So that way you're kind of inviting in the students into that process. That's huge. That's really empowering. But again, I want us to just be super mindful because I think many of us have been conditioned into believing that we need additional assessments, and we don't. We don't. Our kids have so much testing already. And again, if we're just pulling in that type of way, that is such a more like authentic piece of data for me, right? Like that way I know that the content, right? That's the context. This is context embedded language. It's not just pulled in isolation just so that I can do this recording for Mrs. Spina, right? When I go to my EL class, right? I'm just pulling from things that are already there. These are things that the students are working on. And again, maybe I just say like on October 23rd, November 23rd, December 20th, or whatever the day is. I'm going to just go ahead and collect pieces of language data. And again, maybe I look at it by trimesters or semesters and say like, here's what I'm noticing. Maybe I can share pieces of that story with families, with content teachers, grade level teachers, and it can help to, inform instruction. So again, we don't need more assessments. We don't, right? So wanted to share that. And then this is something else. So I'm going to link this here. This is a PDF, so hopefully it links okay, but it's on the WIDA website. It's not going to let me. My computer does this really weird thing. So I'll make sure once this airs, once it's like done, once I'm done being live, I'll go back in and add the links. But let me pull it up so I know what I'm talking about here because I want to get the name of this right. The Access for ELLs, again, this is a WIDA resource, Interpretive Guide for Score Reports. So this is the Spring 2023 PDF. So I want us to be so honest here because as language teachers, again, maybe there's just like 1 or 2 or 3 of us maybe in our school. We don't have a whole lot of time to sit down and like look at individual student data like for access. And we should. That might be something that you advocate for. Like I would love to have a team to do this work with, right? Like maybe it's the school psychologist, maybe it's the data coordinator, maybe it's your EL director and some principals, maybe it's a few grade level or content area teachers. And we sit down and we look at language growth from year to year. this is a great document to review once you get the access scores. And then once you start sharing out access data with classroom and content teachers, this is important for folks to understand. And again, if we're not given that time to kind of explore resources like this, and also just like take a look at our language growth from year to year, this is just so important because it even like breaks down the difference between those proficiency level scores, like the decimals, and the scale scores, which are the 3-digit scores. And many times when we're talking, when I'm talking with EL teachers, we kind of use those scores interchangeably. And there's some nuance. There's some nuance to it. So if you are in that document and you kind of scroll, and again, this is on the WIDA website, you can use proficiency levels. It says here, I'm reading right off of it. It says you can use proficiency levels to make comparisons across domains, but not across grades. Okay. Proficiency levels are grade specific, and they are also domain specific. So you could be a kid who gets like a 370 in one domain and have like a 4.3. And you could get the 370 in reading, but you're going to get a 3.8. So the proficiency levels are domain specific. So the formula is a little bit different. And then the scale scores, we can use the scale scores to make comparisons across grade levels, but not across domains. Okay. And then we can use those scale scores, those 3-digit ones, to monitor student growth over time within a domain. This is really, really big as we're talking about starting to approach the first benchmarking period. This is really, really important. So if we say we have a concern about a student, we have to invite access data into the conversation. We have to invite a language, piece of data. And so if we're looking and saying like, okay, well, I'm really concerned about how the student is growing in science or in math or whatever, I'm going to go ahead and take a look at reading, writing, listening, and speaking across a few different grade levels, however much data I have on that child. And now I'm going to look at the scale score for each domain across each year. That way I can capture the language growth. And again, access is just one measure. That's one snapshot. So that's not all I would use. I would, utilize multiple pieces of data. And again, you got to remember that was one snapshot of one moment in time, right? From like months and months ago. So we just want to be really, really mindful. But having time dedicated at the beginning of the year to sit down and review, it sounds annoying, but it's actually really, really good practice to review that interpretive guide for score reports to make sure we're looking at data correctly. So even if you just say at our next team meeting, we're going to take 10 minutes and we're going to just explore the first few pages of this document just to kind of wrap our heads around how to use some of these scores, right? So again, it sounds annoying, but I think it's really powerful. So I wanted to share that as a resource because again, many times we just hop right into everything that we have to do, and it's good for us to review those pieces. And then I wanted to also link, but it's not letting me link right now. I have a resource. I've shared it a few times on here when we were talking about like celebrating language growth at the end, like by the end of a school year. So like in May, I started to share this resource, like all these different templates and tools that we could talk about, celebrating language growth, but also like goal setting for ourselves. So depending on the age of the student, you might sit down and say like, this is your access score report. You might sit down and say like, here are your scale scores. Like here's where you were last year and here's where you were, this school year. So what do you want to do to continue your language journey? And I think this is a really good conversation to have with everybody because everybody's on a language journey. So if you are co-teaching in a classroom, like this is great for monolingual students too, because they're on a language journey, right? They're all still growing as readers, writers, listeners, and speakers. So we can say like, I really want to focus on, like more speaking, like speaking more confidently or including more academic vocabulary when I speak, something like that. That is a cool moment for a student to say, like, okay, that's where I want to focus. As a languager, I really want to focus on like beefing up that domain. So what do I need to do? So when I'm in social studies, and maybe I'm not with Mrs. Spina in social studies, I'm like with this other teacher here. What do I need to make sure that I'm doing so that I can speak confidently about, whatever our units are going to be about? And what are those like moves, like daily moves that I should be doing? Well, I want to make sure that I'm contributing to class discussion or to like group discussion, or I want to make sure that, I'm doing this or that, or maybe when I'm done in that class, like on my way to my next class, or maybe when I get to my next class, I'm going to make a brief 1 minute like reflection where I'm talking out loud about that lesson. So like, what are those small moves that are going to kind of pay out over time? And then the other big piece is saying, so that's what I need to do for myself as a kid. What do I need from teachers? What do I need my teachers to do? What are the conditions that I need in the classroom so that I can do those things? So this is a powerhouse move. So when we're talking about students who are like at middle school, junior high, and secondary, this is a really, really big conversation. I would say good for everybody, but like as students grow in their maturity, they're able to kind of think about, this kind of longer term planning. And what do I need from teachers? Like I need my teacher to give me breaks during like long chunks of speaking. Like if I'm just sitting there as a listener and the teacher is talking for 20 minutes of the class period or 30 minutes or more, I'm going to need the teacher to stop and pause so that I can dialogue with my peers. And then again, if I'm collecting this type of survey information from students, if I'm the EL teacher, then I'm going to have to go ahead and share that with the classroom and content teachers and say, listen, this student is really serious about beefing up this or that. Here are the conditions that this child has expressed, right? This is what they need in order to reach their goals. And then I'll wrap with these last two ideas. One is that whatever you get in terms of like, when you're collecting linguistic data on students, I want you to not fall into the trap into believing that students go down. And my colleague, Gary Riskin, once said to me, Carly, because I was so upset about certain data. And I was like, oh my gosh, like they went down. He goes, no, they didn't go down. This is one measure. This is one like snapshot of their overall experience, right? Like this is just one thing. You didn't unteach your kids. And I was like, okay. But that is still a phrase that I hold in my heart and in my mind because it really helped me calm down a little bit. Because again, we are conditioned into worrying so much about data. It's a lot. So I want us to all kind of acknowledge and reckon, like, you didn't unteach children. Like they're still growing. We can look for, other pieces. We might say like, why is this one data point looking this type of way? What was happening? Is there a problem with the tool? Is there a problem with my interpretation of this data? All of these things, right? It could be a million different things. But if we're, utilizing multiple data sources and information, then we have a better picture of how students are performing. So we don't have to put all of our eggs in one basket, right? Like we don't have to say this one piece of data shows me that I untaught kids. You didn't. So that's number one. You don't unteach children. They're growing in all kinds of ways. And then the second piece is this. EL data, language data about individual students is not the EL teacher's data. It is school-wide data. Let me say that again. Your EL data, your access scores, that is school-wide data. Because if I'm the EL teacher and maybe I get to see, this group of students for like maybe an hour a day, or maybe, a few half hours a week, right? The language learning doesn't stop because we're not together. Those children are going into all of these different classrooms and they are languaging all day long about all these different content areas. It is not just my responsibility as the EL teacher to grow students in language. That's everybody's job. So this is a snapshot of one student's experience in their school. So I hope that you can take that message forward to your teams that you support, because this is everybody's data, not just the EL teachers' data. So yes, I will make sure that I link that WIDA interpretive guide for score reports. You can find it. You just Google it, but it's on the WIDA website. It is like a 19-page PDF, but again, if you could just take a few minutes to review it with teams, it's really helpful. And then I'll also link in my blog those like stems and frames for reflections, celebrations, and goal setting for languaging. So if you have thoughts, ideas, tools, questions, anything at all, you can leave it in the comments, or you can always reach out to me. You can see my Twitter handle is at the bottom of the page. So I'm always just a DM away, or you can email me, whatever, you can find us. But next week I will be on here with, I believe with Rachel. So lots of fun to come. But thank y'all for joining me so much for this Wednesday evening, our Wind Down Wednesday. Have a great rest of your week, and I'll talk